Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm Julie Lafford, Executive Director of Alumni Engagement at York University, and I'm joining you from my home office today. I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you in the audience, whether this is your first Scholars Hub at home with us, or if you've been joining us week to week, thank you and welcome to this week's event. This webinar is part of our Scholars Hub speaker series, and it's programming that's typically offered in collaboration with and on site at public libraries in and around Toronto. And this series features educational lectures by academics and researchers from York. These lectures are one of the many ways York engages with our nearby communities and invites alumni, students, and the public to participate in meaningful talks and discussions. I'm pleased to be able to bring this series online during the COVID-19 pandemic to allow even more alumni to hear from some of the university's leading scholars. Before we begin, I do want to provide a short update on some of the ways that York is responding to COVID-19 and supporting our students. Over $1 million has been awarded by the Canadian Institute of Health Research to York researchers to fund COVID-19 related research. The research varies from examining social media misinformation to studying countermeasures to the supply chain disruptions in medical and pharmaceutical industries. York International recently introduced daily virtual coffee chats in an effort to build community among York students, whether they're abroad, in residence, on campus, or otherwise. And these chats really help ease feelings of loneliness during this time. Most recently, all School of Continuing Studies students are now included in York's Emergency Bursary Program, which allows any current student to apply for a reimbursement of up to $1,500 for any expense they may have incurred as a result of the pandemic. Although we aren't all in the same location right now, I'd still like to acknowledge that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located, and these precede the establishment of the university. York acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I know that some of you may be new to online events, so if at any time you need help with this experience or have questions about the content, feel free to click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and enter your question. Our team is ready to help you. I want to hand things off to our speaker, Professor O'Reilly, very shortly, but also mention that at the end of the talk, there is a short question and answer period. So if you do have any questions for her, please use the Q&A section that I referenced before. Now, before we begin, I do want to take a quick poll of the audience. There should be a question appearing on your screen shortly, and the question is, have you ever attended a York University alumni event, either in person or online, before today? So please take a moment to respond to that, and thank you for participating. So without further delay, let's get started with today's session. Today's talk is titled, Mothers Are Frontline Workers: Care and Crisis Under COVID-19, featuring Professor Andrea O'Reilly from the School of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at York University. Professor O'Reilly is the co-editor or editor of 20 books, including Feminist Parenting, Perspectives from Africa and Beyond, Toni Morrison and Motherhood, A Politics of Heart, Rocking the Cradle, Thoughts on Motherhood, Feminism, and the Possibility of Empowered Mothering, and Matricentric Feminism, Theory, Activism, and Practice. She is twice the recipient of York University's Professor of the Year Award for Teaching Excellence and is the 2019 recipient of the Status of Women in Equity Award of Distinction from the Ontario Confederation of University Faculty Associations. Welcome, Professor O'Reilly. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Hello, can you hear me? I think I've lost the video.
I can both hear and see you, so I think you're okay.
I can't see anybody, so I do apologize. For some reason, the screen has gone blank. But as long as you can see me, I'm good. You can see me okay?
I can, sure, okay. Absolutely. And I'm assuming our tech team in the back will take care of
okay, thank you, and I apologize.
Yeah, for some reason, and I'm getting a message right now saying everything's fine, Professor.
Okay,
so you're on.
Okay, I apologize. It just
not
went
at
blank.
all. Not at all.
Okay,
We
All
learn
right.
every time we do one of these. So thank you again. I will hand things over to you. Very much looking forward to this very timely talk on an important subject that I don't think is getting enough attention.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Over to you.
The title of my talk, as you said, is Mothers are Frontline Workers, Care and Crisis Under COVID-19. And just two caveats. I'm here in Cohill, Ontario at our family's cottage in self-isolation, and I don't have a printer, so I'm kind of going to be reading from another screen. And I also have 6 cats roaming about. So if you see one, just say hello. They may be behind me as I speak. So I will begin. The central directive of the COVID-19 pandemic has been conveyed in 2 words: stay home. But there has been little public discussion on how families are managing under socialization. Few have acknowledged, let alone sought to support, the crucial work mothers are doing as frontline workers to keep families functioning in these times of increasing uncertainty and anxiety. Now, when I use the term mothers, I refer to any individual who engages in mother work. This term is not limited to biological mothers, but applies to anyone who does the work of mothering as a central part of their life. As studies confirm, mothers do approximately 50 to 60% more domestic labor and childcare than fathers. With social isolation, the burden of care work has increased exponentially in both time and concern as mothers are running households with little or no support and under close to impossible conditions. This raises questions and concerns on how mothers are managing with these new expectations and destabilizing restraints. And although research over the last few decades does point to a decreasing gap in the division of labor in our homes between men and women as mothers and fathers, this does not necessarily translate into more equitable labor in that home. What it means is that mothers are taking on less by outsourcing some of their load. What has been particularly compounded, I think, in this pandemic is what I call the third shift: the emotional and intellectual labor of mother work, what philosopher Sarah Ruddick has termed maternal thinking, the organizing, the remembering, the planning that mothers take on for the family, knowing a child's shoe size, making dentist appointments, organizing play dates or carpools, learning and remembering how hot or cold they like their soup, remembering homework due dates, assessing their children's triggers for fatigue, health, boredom, anxiety, and so on. These are examples of the emotional load mothers carry all day, every day. This work has not and cannot be downloaded and has increased exponentially during the pandemic, becoming more and more arduous with every week of social isolation. As well, many mothers are now also engaged in paid labor from the home and responsible for their children's education as schools remain closed indefinitely. Mothers have little to no respite from their 24/7 days, with most outdoor activities canceled for children and with no one allowed into their homes. Add income or employment loss, financial or housing instability, single parenting, new immigrants, mothers in abusive situation, and the stress is amplified. Indeed, as Dr. Nathan Stahl from Sinai Health System in Toronto emphasizes, all of us are being affected by this, but I always think it's important to recognize that women during a pandemic are really bearing the brunt of all this, and I think that should not be ignored. Closing his words. When there is no separation between work and family and home, what toll is this taking on mothers? The issue is that mothering is invisibilized. Nobody sees this at work. It is just something mothers are expected to do. And under a pandemic microenvironment, we can expect to see the pressures rise exponentially with added work stress and anxiety. At an individual level, as Helen Lewis explains in her Atlantic articles entitled "The Coronavirus is a Disaster for Feminism. The Pandemic Affects Men and Women Differently." This is what she writes: "The choices of many couples over the next few months will make perfect economic sense. What do pandemic patients need? Looking after. What do self-isolating older people need? Looking after. What do children kept home from school need? Looking after. All this looking after, this unpaid caring labor will fall more heavily on women because of the existing structure of the workforce. It's not just about social norms of women performing care roles, it's also about practicality. Who is paid less? Who has that flexibility? And in most households, this person is the mother. Indeed, as Andrea Flynn notes in her Ms. op-ed article, the coronavirus had laid bare many divisions in our society. And like any serious crisis does, it has elevated the extent to which structural sexism permeates our lives, impacting the gender division of labor within the home, and also shaping what is possible for women and particularly mothers in the public sphere. Indeed, there is more pressures on mothers now. We are expecting mothers to be educators. There is more on the to-do list, and we are hearing messages how to stimulate your child at home, not let them fall behind academically, and to use this new time to do something like learn a new instrument. The standards are going up when they should be completely relaxed. Indeed, as Helen Lewis writes in that Atlantic article, enough already. When people try to be cheerful about social distancing and working from home, noting that William Shakespeare and Isaac Newton did some of their best work while England was ravaged by the plague, there is an obvious response. Neither of them had childcare responsibilities. Shakespeare spent most of his career in London, where the theaters were, while his family lived in Stratford. During the plague of 1606, the playwright was lucky to be spared from the epidemic, and his wife and two adult daughters stayed safely in the countryside. Newton, meanwhile, never married or had children. He saw out the Great Plague of 1665-66 on his family's estate in the east of England, and spent most of his adult life as a fellow at Cambridge University, where his meals and housekeeping were provided by the college. We must recognize and support mothers as frontline workers. To recognize and appreciate what mothers are facing and accomplishing in the home under truly unimaginable circumstances. We are rightly honoring the essential service of many in the public service who are keeping us safe and cared for. Doctors, nurses, first responders, truck drivers, retail workers, cleaners. But no one, to my knowledge, has publicly thanked mothers. No one has acknowledged, let alone honored, the essential work mothers are doing in our homes that are keeping our families safe and cared for. The question must be, why is that? The pandemic has also resulted in greater appreciation for the work of many that was little valued and poorly paid pre-pandemic, such as PSWs and retail workers, and responded to with a call for increased wages and respect. But again, no one is saying the same for mothers and mother work. Why are we not recognizing and doing the same for mothers and mother work? Why are people not asking, how are the mothers coping? What can we do for families? Why are we not asking these questions? Why is our government only talking about and providing support for waged work and not care work? These are important and necessary questions to ask now and to learn from. Sadly, despite these hugely life-altering changes of the pandemic, one thing remains unchanged. Mothers' work remains invisibilized, devalued, and taken for granted. So just to end, how can we provide help for mothers? The first thing is to create a space where mothers can talk about what they are experiencing, whether it's on the phone, through video, chat, or social media. We should be open and listening to mothers' stories. And we need immediately to develop social policy and research to support mothers and their essential work of caregiving. As Claire Gann wonders in her recent Today's Parent articles, why is no one talking about how unsustainable this is for working parents? What's the solution? I don't know, but I think as parents, we need to start demanding some sort of plan. Maybe our Prime Minister could implore companies to reduce workload for parents while keeping full-time salaries, or offer a salary guarantee similar to the wage subsidy for parents who chose to take a leave of absence to care for their kids. Offer guidelines for how to safely set up small neighborhood daycares or childcare swaps. Because one thing is certain, even as the current headlines begin to talk about the economy slowly coming to life, parents' lives won't go back to normal until we get our village back. End of quote. And just to conclude, indeed, now more than ever, we must recognize and support the care work mothers perform to sustain our families and our communities. And it is time to finally ask and address why mother work, even during times of a pandemic when it is so crucial, remains so devalued and invisibilized. It's not time to name mother work for what it is, an essential service, and to proclaim that mothers are indeed frontline workers in this pandemic, deserving of the same appreciation and support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor O'Reilly. Really appreciate this important message that I think a lot more people need to hear. So now it's time for some Q&A from the audience. So audience, please use that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions of Professor O'Reilly. So I have one that's just come in here. Why does mother work and care work remain so invisible, particularly now during a pandemic?
Well, I think that is the question we should be asking and exploring. I think it stems largely pre-pandemic. We just, as I mentioned very briefly, and certainly could be talked about more, is that it's just so invisibilized. It's just something women do. We just take it for granted. It's natural, it's intuitive, it's just, love. So I don't ever think we see mothering as what it is. It is work. It might be joyous work. We might love our work, and we might, and certainly may love our children. But I really think our society measures and determines value, by wages, right? And there's been so much literature of how our very society, pre, post, and in the pandemic is truly sustained by unpaid care work. And when we don't pay somebody some money for doing what they do, it tends to have no value in our society. But I still remain perplexed. We're 7 weeks in, and I have truly heard no one thank a mother publicly.
Yeah.
I watched on Friday night that beautiful hour, guess it was a coming together of Canada's, and everybody was shouting out of thanks, and so they should. Everyone was thanked, right? I didn't hear a single person say thank you to the people that are keeping us clothed, fed, educated, safe, secure. It's been, mothers are doing that work, and no one has acknowledged it, let alone appreciated it. So I'm a bit dumbfounded that it is so entrenched, this naturalization and visibilization of mother work, that even in a pandemic where our very lives are hanging in the balance of that work, no one is even talking about it.
Yeah.
That shows, I just think, how ingrained it is, right? And it hasn't been dislodged. Unlike other things have been dislodged in the pandemic. We are now recognizing that retail workers deserve $15, $16, $17 an hour. We're having that conversation. We took them for granted, and we took PSWs for granted. And this has been a huge awakening that, these are the people that we depend on in our society, and they should be paid and respected more. And I completely emphatically agree with that. But that is not being said about mothers. That same sort of awakening of appreciation of that taken for granted labor pre-pandemic. It hasn't yet happened for mothers as it has happened for people in the waged economy. And so it should be happening. But can we not also make it happen, that same appreciation and recognition for care work?
So I'm getting a lot of questions, very relevant questions to what you're speaking about now, about what are the ways that we can use our voices to make these issues seen by the government, some questions about how do we shift this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
How do we individually support mothers? So people are looking for some practical ways that we can make changes and have mother work recognized.
I think that's the question. And again, I'm dumbfounded. There is more and more. This is something we are doing. I'm a publisher of a feminist press on mothering, as well as my other job as a professor at York. And we actually do have a call for papers out for a volume that will be published on mothering and COVID-19. And for that research project, I'm now filing and reading journal articles on the topic. And I'm seeing a bit more the last week. but it still hasn't created sort of a shift in the conversation. I'm regularly following the news like everyone is, and only last night, for the first time since the pandemic, have they talked about parenting, and it was parenting, not mothering. And they interviewed the woman from Today's Parent that I just quoted from, and they had her on, Zoom, and she spoke briefly. That was the first time in 7 weeks I've seen any media coverage of what this is doing to mothers, on our television screens. So as viewers, as citizens, I think we just start saying, we got to start talking about this. When Trudeau has his talks, somebody should be sending in those questions. What about care work? What about families? Why is nothing being done? I think we just got to keep pushing and asking those questions. And then maybe, the media will start taking an interest, and then maybe we can start thinking about public policy, social policy, to truly support families, because it's not sustainable. Particularly the pandemic protocols are not sustainable for single mothers. They cannot stay locked in for another month, without any support or respite.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Now looking maybe to something on the brighter side, do you believe the pandemic will change how we acknowledge and support mother work? Could this be the turning point where this work is suddenly recognized and valued for what it is?
I hope so. Right now, I remain doubtful. As I said, I've seen that shift with waged work, and it's a long time coming that, we're now recognizing the crisis in our nursing homes and our long-term care facilities. I think the pandemic, thankfully, is going to make huge changes there that needed to be done 30 years ago, right? It's going to result in change. I believe that. And I think it's going to result in change to our minimum wage. I really think after this, people are going to respect retail workers, and they're going to get the wage they deserve. I don't know about mothers. I'm not seeing that public discussion yet. I've not seen anybody say, hey, wait a minute, now the spotlight on families. Wow, can't believe all the work mothers do, unrecognized, unvalued, unsupported, taken for granted. I'm certainly not seeing that yet, but maybe it's coming, and maybe people can just stop and think for a moment that you are, eating and sleeping and getting your homework done because a mother's doing that work, right? And I'm not minimizing fathers. I know I'm using the term mothers. I'm doing that deliberately political. It's a political choice I make because it is mothers overwhelmingly who do care work and pay the price of that care work. Though there are many engaged fathers, and I do a shout out to them, but I think it's overwhelmingly mothers who are doing the first, second, and third shift during the pandemic. And maybe if we all stopped and just said it as we're doing for other frontline workers, maybe that conversation would start.
So I have a couple of questions related to balancing, if you would, motherhood and paid labor. The first one's from May Friedman, and asking, how can we expose our hard work without potentially seeming like we're not doing our paid employment?
Mm-hmm.
I worry that if I make my homework visible, I will be sanctioned in the context of my waged work.
Yes, hi May. I do know May. Thank you, May. That is such a crucial question.
Good one.
I'm seeing a bit of that. In fact, the Today's Parent article talked a bit about that, because our care work historically and still has been used against women, right, to against us in our careers and our career advancement. So mothers rightly are saying, like, if I start saying, I need extra time, or I need maybe less assignments, that could be used, as it has been historically, to keep women back in their jobs and in their careers. So I don't know. I still think it's time. I mean, again, perhaps safer for others, less so, depending on job security, wages, food security. I mean, I think if you have that security, yeah, then you take that privilege and you use it. If you're in a secure employment, to, push back, shout out. But yeah, it's all tricky because everybody's, talking about how great this moment is. We have so much time, and, I'm cooking, all these recipes, and I'm thinking, and whose household? I mean, I can only imagine a mother, single mom with 3 kids right now, 2, 4, and 8, trying to cook and clean and care for them and keep their own anxiety under control. and to, oversee their homework at 3 different grade levels. That is about 4 jobs that you're asking, mothers to do in, an 8 or 10 hour day cycle. It's not sustainable. So, but you're right. I mean, if we shout out or too much, that could result in backlash and sanctions. So I agree. It's a very delicate balance. But if you're at the tipping point, I think if you can, jump, right, and make that speak the outrage. But again, for women who are able to, and not to judge or penalize women who cannot.
Thank you. Next question is quite related and something that's near and dear to my heart. What can managers of people who are mothers do to help right now?
Okay, this is for me flexibility. I'm hearing from several workplaces, and I'm not going to name them, who, even though they're working from home, they're still required to sign in at 8:30 or 9, whatever their start time is, and sign out at their regular finish time, 4:30 or 5, and to sign out at lunch. That's ludicrous. That I don't care when you do your job, let people do it according to the rhythms of their day schedule. So if you're at home with 3 kids and you're overseeing, homeschooling and remote learning and trying to keep the kids occupied and not kill each other and cook, then you should be able to do your paid labor at night. But I'm still hearing from many women that they're still expected to clock in under their 9 to 5 hours. That goes now. Employers, no. Stop it and allow workers to work when it is best for their own schedule. So if they're working from 8 at night to 2 in the morning, let them. But I think there's still a lot of rigidity in a lot of workplaces of signing in, and a lot of surveillance is going on. So that stops now. I understand employers need to know their employees are working, but give them that flexibility, and please understand that they're not going to be working at full capacity. They've got other work to do, which is equally, if not more important, and that's caring for their families.
Thank you for that. That's a great perspective. We have time for just one more question, and I'm going to, oh, wait a second. I have a question from a Facebook viewer, Sean Cameron Patterson. Should a caregiving or mothering policy be tackled at the provincial or federal level?
It's a good question. I'm not a political economist or scientist. I think it really would depend on what the policy is. But I think in terms of what's being at the national level in terms of CERB, wage subsidies, I think we could imaginatively come up with an equivalent at the federal level in terms of policies that are similar to the current ones Trudeau is enacting in terms of CERB, as I said, or wage subsidies. But it might have to be more at the micro level. It might have to be with our workplaces, but everybody needs to step up. Employers need to step up here and allow flexibility and less surveillance. Communities have to step up, check in on mothers. You need me to get your bag of milk. What do you need? I think we all have to step up. And it might be more grassroots at stepping up until we get that larger public policy I think we urgently need. But right now we're in crisis. So whatever we can do as a community, as society, to support mothers, but I just like someone publicly to say thank you, mothers, for what you're doing. That would be revolutionary. So I think it's time that if you feel that way, that you want to honor, support, and recognize as the essential service mothers are doing and keeping our families growing through this unimaginable times, say it and say it loud.
Thank you so much for that. One way that people are interested in making their voices heard is by sharing this video on social media. So a recording will be made available, and I do encourage you to share that. And Professor O'Reilly, if you have resources, links of any kind that you would like us to share with the audience here today, or ones that might be viewing the video at a later time, please send them over to us and we'd be happy to.
Well, I'm currently setting up a website associated with Demeter Press, the press I'm publisher of, a website on mothering and COVID. And so once that's up and running, I'm hoping it to be a resource for articles, but also spaces where mothers can reach out and support each other. So I'm hoping that's going to be up very soon. But until then, yes, certainly people share and support one another.
Thank you very much. It would be a pleasure to be able to share that link broadly. So please send it along when you have it.
Will do once it's up.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. So before I say goodbye to our audience, I just want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. And I have one last poll for all of you. And this question helps inform our events moving forward and how we tailor them for you. It should be appearing on your screen right now. Would you recommend this event to a friend? So thanks for participating in that poll as well. Excuse me, a bit tongue-tied today. So thank you for participating in the poll and for our in today's event. If you have feedback or suggestions about our programming, it's very welcome. Please send it to us at alumni@yorku.ca. Next week, we will also be doing our first virtual day-long lecture series, York Circle at Home. So you can hear the latest and most exciting research from York's leading professors. So you can drop into a session anytime on Saturday. They're running from 9:30 in the morning through till almost 4 p.m. in the evening, or you can stay for them all, as I will be. So you can visit our website at alumniandfriends.yorku.ca to learn more about that and to register. And of course, we will be returning with Scholars Hub at Home on Wednesday, May 13th, live at noon. And that talk will feature Professor Fuminori Toyosaki, and he'll be speaking about the supply chain disruptions in medical and pharmaceutical industries during this pandemic. So thank you all once again for being here. And as usual, I wish you all continued health and wellness during this time. Thank you.